Glennys has put on, those of you who come to the UFO group know that she's been a conference organiser for 3 conferences, was it? Four in Brisbane. And she's always organising something, having meetings at her place, having international lecturers and local speakers. And she's also a reverend with the Valley Spiritualist Church. Who's been there, by the way? I keep meaning to go. 4 people. Okay. And Glennys has church meetings at her place on the
second and fourth Sunday morning, 10 a.m. There we are.
So it's really, and she's also a clairvoyant medium and has meditation groups at her place on a Tuesday night where you do some channeling as well.
Yeah, I've got a few people that channel and do very well.
So Glennys is a really well-known Brisbane personality in both the spiritualist field and the UFO community, and we love her for it.
Thank you.
She's a lovely person, very kind-hearted, and she has a really incredible story to tell about her personal experiences. So she's here to tell you about that, and also to tell you about some of the history of the spiritual movement. So please welcome Glennys Mackay.
Thank you. And I want to thank you for inviting me. I was actually born and reared in Hobart in Tasmania. My parents had a farm, and then when I was 18, I married. My husband was from New Zealand. He came over. He was an All Black. He was playing against Australia in the Springboks, and then he conned me into going back to New Zealand, getting married. So we were married for 55 years before he passed away. But in that time, I've done a lot of travelling. I've spent quite a bit of time in America, and I had 12 years in Hawaii. I used to do radio shows. I used to be wined and dined by the head of the Defence Department of America. I met a lot of interesting people, and some not so interesting, especially when they get to the top and they become corrupt. But you can't talk about them. I know a few people have said to me, why don't you write a book? I said I'd have to write it as a fiction because I'd probably get shot the first week that I wrote it, but I'll put my glasses on. So I just wrote some notes because, you know, sometimes you're inclined to forget, and I don't want to waffle on too much. So I'm looking back over 60 years of my life on Earth. This is written quite a few years ago, if some of you had said that I would embark on a never-ending journey of encounters, healing experiences, and many other facets of paranormal phenomena, as scientists call it, I certainly would not have believed it. I was one of 7 children, the youngest girl, brought up on a farm in Tasmania. My parents were hard workers and only wanted the best for their children, having sent us to the best private schools. I was always a very sensitive child, having come into this world as a stillbirth. And some hours later, when my father requested to see what this baby looked like, Dr. Brettingham Moore requested a nurse to take my father in to see me. On unwrapping the sheet I was wrapped in, found there was still life. So as a result, the doctor breathed into my lungs and got me breathing. Although he informed my parents that I may not live, but should I live, I could be brain damaged, and that must be the problem now. Anyway, I weighed under 3 pounds, and it was a real challenge for my parents as well as my older sisters and brother. So I finished up in the Australian Medical Journal at the time. I guess God decided then and there was lots of work for me to do on this earth. As a hyperactive child was always to be found climbing trees or among the animals, my father realised I had a gift. I had no fear. In the early age, I used to heal sick animals. I had my spirit friends, although at the time did not realise that they were not physical. I used to tell elderly relatives that the angels were waiting for them, and that also certain relatives that had passed on were waiting for them. Many times I was in trouble, as this would happen, and on about 4 months my father's 2 sisters and brother-in-law passed away. As a result, my parents were told not to bring that peculiar kid up to the farm, as she's a jinx, because every time she comes someone dies. So when I started school, it was pretty stressful because I used to see things happening and I'd tell the children, and of course the But I'd get into trouble because they'd say, oh, Glennys Jackson made me do it. So anyway, so after a while I finally kept my mouth shut. So, you know, that was part of my life. And then I met my husband and got married and went to live in New Zealand. I lived there for 20 years. My 3 children were born there. Or prior to that, when I was 18 months old, I was drowned at a beach. I don't remember much about that. But then at 15, I was swimming at Sandy Bay and I was in the water swimming. I wasn't a very good swimmer, but this guy came up and put his hands around my throat and held me under and tried to drown me. And fortunately for me, and it was the most amazing experience because I knew I was going to die. And then all of a sudden it was like I had an explosion in my head, and then I drifted. I guess it was in not realising that it was a spirit world. And when I finally came to, I was on the beach and there were police and ambulance there because this crazy young guy had gone around trying to drown other people and someone had rung them. So I was very fortunate that the ambulance and the people brought me back to life. So that was one of my first experiences of death. And then at 29, I had my first heart attack and went over into the spirit world. And of course, I'm here now, Reggie came back. But over those years, I've had a number of death experiences. And what's interesting is I don't have any fear of death because it's just another state of consciousness. And when you go over there, it's like you know the past, the present and the future. And it's just quite incredible. And the beauty and the feeling of love, absolute love. And so that was, and then I had another time I had a heart attack. It was after midnight. And I thought to myself, and when you go out, there's no walls, nothing. And I thought, I wonder if George, it's my husband, knew I just had a heart attack. And I was immediately back in the room. And I was looking down at him, and he got out of bed and he's trying to, in the dark, trying to find the light. And I remember him bouncing off the built-in wardrobe. And I thought, oh, I better go back and tell him that he had a heart attack. Well, the next thing I remember was waking up in the PA hospital, and obviously my life force came back because I remember my legs going up, my arms, and they said, and I was in intensive care. So I said to them, well, I know what happened and I'm going home. And they said, no, you can't go home because you just had a heart attack and you've got to stay in hospital. I said, no, I'm going. So I had to sign all these papers and I went home because there was no way I was going to stay in hospital. So, and then about 15 years ago, I had another, and I finished up in PA. I had a triple bypass and valve repair. But it was interesting, it went wrong and they had to take me back to theatre that night. And I always remember this man well dressed, obviously a doctor that had been out for dinner, and it was about 8 o'clock at night. And I heard him saying to this doctor, how the hell did you let this happen? Get this woman back to theatre straight away. So I was in the theatre and I was floating around listening to them. And then all of a sudden, I was wished out into the spirit world again. And it was just quite amazing, because there was all these people. I don't know how many, they were in, lots and lots. And a lot of them had their arms crossed, so I couldn't get through. So they then said, you have to go back, because you're not ready and you've got work to do. So I came back, and I remember coming to in the where they took me in. I heard them saying, we've got to get our lungs working. We have to get our lungs working, and so that was another time. But it's interesting because even though I felt I was communicating with people, I also knew that I had nothing to worry about, and I also realised that everything is past, present, and future are all one. And it's like you can see things, but you come back with this most amazing peace and beauty and love. And that's what it's all about, is being able to help other people and know that they've got work for you to do, so you have to go back. And I guess I have to behave myself at times. But, it's been wonderful because I've had the opportunity to help people by running meditation groups. I started, I was brought up a Catholic, and I remember I went to St Mary's College in Hobart, and the old Reverend Mother used to get me into the office on a Monday morning, and she'd say, "What did you see? What did you pick up?" And I'd talk to her, tell her, and then a few of the other nuns would be there, and then they'd say, "You mustn't talk about this to the other students." And then you'd go to confession, and the old priest would say, "You have to go and do act of contrition, 10 Hail Marys, because this is the work of the devil." So, but I've never ever met him, even though those nice little religious people come knocking at your door at times and want to put you in and tell you, you know, you've got to change your life. And they talk about the devil, and I said, "Well, can you explain what he looks like? Because I've never met him." And they look at me flabbergasted, and anyway, they shake their shoulder and go. But I noticed they put a cross on the telly pole outside my house, so that tells that they'd come. And then they came one day and bought this lovely book, and they said, "Please, we'd like you to have this." Okay, I said, so after they went, I opened it up, and there was 5 pages on the evils of spiritualism. Yeah, so anyway, but they haven't been back, so that's okay. But look, I spent quite a bit of time over in America. I was guided, but when I was a little girl, I used to say to my mother, so I was about 4 or 5, I said, one day I'm going to live in New Zealand, I'm going to go to America. I didn't have a clue where these places were. And obviously, I think when you come back into this world, you bring a lot of memories and knowledge from the previous times that you've been here. And so I did. I married a New Zealander, and then I spent 12 years working and living in Hawaii. And since '89, I've been lecturing and working over in various parts of America, where I met some amazing people. I was very, very fortunate to spend a lot of time with these people. But I think because I was, I started the QFON, Queensland UFO Network, and I had brought out quite a lot of international speakers over those times that we had the meetings here, the symposiums. I got to know a lot of people over there. So I was invited over to lecture at some of their conferences, and I was also invited to Brasilia at a World UFO conference, where I met lots of amazing people. And then I was fortunate enough to, I took quite a few of the speakers with me. I went up to spend time with Joel Texieri-Defaria, or what they call John of God. And I was very fortunate because when we first arrived there, this woman came and met us, and she was a doctor from Brazil, from Rio, and she said she had a lot of patients would come back after visiting him, and they'd be cured of diabetes and cancers, etc. So she decided she'd go up and check him out. And she said, here I am 3 years later. She said, I went back, closed my surgery, and I've been here ever since, because when people arrive from all over the world, some of them, you know, are very, very sick and they need help. And what I thought was absolutely beautiful, when you arrive, they've got all these volunteers, and they insist that they make these big pots of vegetable soup, and they insist that everybody has some soup because they've travelled for so long. But he said through her, because I couldn't speak Portuguese, said he wanted me to sit in the medium's chair, so which was probably from here to where you're sitting. And so people just walked through, and he'd sit there and he'd either write a prescription or tell them to go that way for an operation. And it was quite interesting. I was just praying for everybody that came that needed healing. And then I heard this man say to me, we're going to be working with you more in the future. I got such a shock, I opened my eyes and couldn't see anyone. Anyway, later I mentioned to this doctor what I saw. So she took me into another room where all these drawings and paintings were. And there's this spirit doctor, well, the one I saw. So, and apparently he's quite famous. Don't ask me his name because I can't remember, but I think a friend of mine over there would be able to tell me that's been there. But yeah, and then we went to another place, the Valley of the Sun, and when we went there, it's quite an incredible place. It's there's a temple and everything, and these people were dressed in long gowns and that. And apparently we heard that these UFO craft fly in and they stay there till they get acclimatised. But I'm quite sure some of them were aliens, even though they look like us. And so we were taken into this temple, and it was just quite incredible. It was very spiritual, and there was quite a lot of the speakers that I took there. And and one of the chaps was from Israel, and he saw them wearing this cross, and he said, "Why are they wearing those crosses? That's our Jewish." And I said, "Well, maybe they are." So, for hundreds of years they've been wearing those crosses that the Jews wear. But it was quite incredible because the energy was quite incredible at this place. So, I've been very lucky and very privileged to meet some amazing people in my life. I spent quite a bit of time in America, travelling around and working in different areas. And, some of the funny experiences you have. One of the things that I liked in Memphis, just about everybody's related to our famous singer, and it's quite priceless. But so over the years, every time I came back from America, I'd bring boxes of books because books were so much cheaper over there, and so I got involved in reading a lot of the old books from Helen Blavatsky and Alice Bailey and Alan Kardec and Wayne Dyer. Wayne Dyer is a fantastic person. I spent a bit of time with him in Hawaii. He had a place there, and we used to go along with my friend whose husband was one of the directors of Hawaiian Airlines, and we'd go to Unity Church, and sometimes he'd take the service. Then we'd go and have lunch with him afterwards. And he is the most beautiful soul. He was just lovely. But he sadly, I think it's a few years since he passed. And Barbara Brennan, she's written a book on healing. I spent a long weekend with her and Shakti Gawain, which were very interesting people. Harry Edwards, who's a healer, as most of you probably know, he has been coming through our service at meditation, and I would trance and he'd come through and give us knowledge and information on healing. He was a very amazing man. The other person that I didn't spend time with him, but I read his books, was Gerald Ouspensky. Has anyone read any of his books? He wrote The Search of the Miraculous. Amazing. He actually was born in St. Petersburg, although it used to be called Petrograd. Yeah, it used to be called Petrograd. And then he travelled and spent time in London and Sweden and Denmark and a lot of the places where he used to teach. And he was his father was I think he was a barrister, but he wrote quite a few books, and one of them was The Survival After Death, Scientifically Explained. And if you can get hold of that book on In Search of the Miraculous, it's quite interesting to read. The other one is Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. I think you probably heard of him. And Maurice Babinell, who used to channel Silver Birch. How many have heard of Maurice Babinell? Maurice was an amazing man. When he was about 18, he went off by his editor to go to Hannah Swaffer's meditation, and he wanted him to write, something derogatory about them. Anyway, he went off to it, but the second time, he went back the second time, and he thought he fell asleep, but instead he channeled. He channeled the spirit guide that said his name was Silver Birch. Anyway, over the years, Maurice Babinell, he created the Psychic News in London. He's written lots and lots of books, or people have written a lot of the books of the channeling that came through from Silver Birch. He died here about, I think it was about 10 or 12 years ago he passed away. But the books are quite amazing if ever you can get hold of them. And Alice Bailey, she was quite amazing. She used to channel and wrote, most of her books have been written through a Tibetan master called Dong Quao, called The Two Disciples. And he I don't know how many have read any of Alice Bailey's books, but they're really, really interesting. The knowledge and wisdom that have come through from this Tibetan master. Well, they call themselves off-world people. He used to write so many, and so much, and the knowledge that comes through is quite incredible. So if ever you get a chance to purchase or get hold of his books, a lot of these books were written many years ago, and of course a lot of them are probably almost out of print now, but if you can go to a spiritualist church. Now the other thing too was interesting, Helena Blavatsky, I don't know how many of you people have heard of Helena. She was Russian, and when she was 17 she married General Blavatsky, who was many, many years older than her, and anyway, she took off and she'd go and investigate things, and she went to Tibet, and what she did, she disguised herself as a man, as a boy, and went into a monastery and spent several years learning from the Tibetan masters. Then she spent a lot of time in London and travelling through Europe, and then she, trying to remember all this, then she went to America. She was guided to go to America, where she started the Theosophical Society. Don't know whether you've ever been to it. She started the Theosophical Society, and after she died, I think she died in, God, I can't remember, early in the this century, and then Alice Bailey took over, and she helped to run the Theosophical Society. Excuse me. So there was just so many interesting people way back then. Alan Kardec, that wasn't his real name, he wrote the Spirits book and the Mediums. Now he, like he was born in France in 1804, I've actually written that down, and his father and that were barristers, and when he was in about 1828, I think, or 29, he hired a hall and he started teaching. He taught over 500 students on comparative anatomy, astrology, science, and he spent 10 years, and then he decided to get interested in spiritual and metaphysics. So he heard about these two young girls that were channeling, so he went along to visit them and he sat with them, and so over a period of 2 or 3 years he'd sit with them and they would bring knowledge and information from spirit to him. And it was very interesting, because then he studied psychic clairvoyance. Even though he wasn't a clairvoyant, these two young girls tranced and brought through the messages. Now I'm trying to see where I've got as he said, they were the highest intelligence, and they suggested he put pen to paper and write a book, not in his name, but the name Allan Kardec, and that was in 1867, it's a long time ago. He published it, and what is spiritual? He published one as What is Spiritualism, and the Medium book. Then also the Gospel as Explained by Spirits, and they were the books that he's written. Now they're still being published, and if you go to the Theosophical Society, you probably would be able to pick up and see these books. Very, very interesting. But Helen Blavatsky, she has written quite a few books, and it's really worth seeing if you can get hold of and read some of the knowledge in that and the wisdom that's in these books. Does anyone want to ask me any questions? I don't guarantee I can answer it, but try. Yes.
Maybe some people here might relate, but when you had these gifts as a child, how did you cope with that, feeling like you were different to other people, or did you think you were? Or?
I didn't realise when I was little that I was any different until Dad's older sister, they never had any children, and they all had farms, and they had I had about 29 trucks on the road at the time. They owned a pretty well off, they owned a hotel, and not a hotel, a brewery, and then they'd meet up at my Aunt Mary's place on a Sunday, and there'd be 20 odd people, or family, and I'd be sitting there and I'd often see someone come and stand behind them. but I didn't know he was in spirit. And over that 4 months, I'd see people, and I'd see an aunt that had passed over, and I'd give them messages. And this particular aunt, I told her that, like it was her husband, that he was going to meet her at 3:15 that afternoon. And I remember my mum, the hand came up and slapped me on the face. I'll never forget that. Anyway, she did. In those days, the toilet was, way away from the house. And so she went down the steps to go, and she had a heart attack and died at 3:15 that afternoon. So that's when my aunt told Dad not to bring that peculiar kid up to the farm, because she's a jinx, because every time she comes up here, someone dies. But I had no idea that I was any different to anyone else. And I think I was about 6 or 7. I used to get up early and go with Dad to milk the cow. We had a big farm, and he used to have a killing shed, and he used to have a butcher who used to come twice a week, and they'd prepare the meat and they'd take it into the restaurants and hotels around Hobart. And it was quite interesting. This particular morning I went up and he milked the cow. He had an old cow that she'd stand anywhere, and I remember him sitting me up in the wattle tree while he milked her, and when we'd finished we were about to go, and I had the hurricane lamp. It was early in the winter months, and there was this big huge light way over where the pigs were, over in the back paddock, and it came up over, and I remember the horses and the cattle and sheep scattered and went down under the trees, and then this light went up in the sky and disappeared. So I always remember he said to me, "Now, we better get down for breakfast, because Mummy will wonder where we are, and we're not going to tell her we saw the moon flying across the sky. It'll be our secret." So I think that was the beginning of all the episodes and experiences I had with craft, UFOs and people from another world. And I used to get woken up. Another time in '64, I was followed home. I'd gone to the pictures, and I was on the way home, and this huge craft came over, and it lit up the paddock, and the cattle, the sheep scattered. And then when I turned into our street, it went over the top of my head, and it went across over the top of the houses, and I would have taken up about 3 houses. In those days it was about a 1/4 acre average block, and I remember trying to get away from it. The next thing I know, I'm heading towards a power pole. Don't remember another thing till I drove in my driveway, and this craft was stationary over the houses opposite us. So I was scared stiff, and I didn't know whether to go to the back door or the front door. So I went up the front door onto the terrace, went in the bedroom, because we had a big L-shaped house, and I woke my husband and I said, quick, I've been followed home by a UFO. And he looked at the clock and he said, "It's 10 to 12. Where the bloody hell have you been? Have you been drinking?" And I said, No. And I opened the blinds. I said, "Quick, get out of bed. There it is." Well, by the time he got out and looked, it took off, and within seconds it was over the Tower Ranges. And then from then on, I used to get woken just about 11:30 at night. I'd get up, I'd open the blinds, and I'd be telepathically communicating with somebody, and then I'd go back to bed about 2:15 every morning. And that went on for months. And then, of course, in my youngest daughter, she was the second child in New Zealand to have a kidney transplant way back in those days. But anyway, a few years later, I was diagnosed with cancer of the larynx and lungs, and they reckon you never get over that. And instead of going into Palmerston North Hospital where they were doing radium treatment, I had this dream, and this entity came to me and told me that if I went in, I'd never come out. And because I was going through stress, am I going to be around to see my children grow up? You go through all this negative stuff when you've got cancer. Anyway, they told me they'd guide me to this place and I'd be healed. So I woke up the next morning and I mentally said to myself, "I'm not going to die." Well, that was the most positive thing that I'd ever said. So my mother-in-law came, I got in a car to drive, and instead of going to Palmerston, I finished up going down towards Wellington to a little place called Greytown. And it was interesting because it was like a force was driving my car. It was like I had no control on where I was going. My mother-in-law thought I was crazy, and she was Scottish, by the way. Anyway, we drove into the country, drove up this driveway, and knocked at the door. And you know what's funny? I can still remember the sound of the gravel under the car wheels as I went up the... Went over, knocked at the door, and this very tall Indian-looking man opened the door and said, "Come in, I've been expecting you." So he said to my mother-in-law, "You go and sit out there and read a book." I went into this room. It was probably bigger than this, and it had glass windows. There were some people lying on couches, others sitting in chairs. I had the most amazing feeling of peace come over me as I went in that room. I sat there and I listened when he went around. There was a lady was taken out of the hospital and brought down. She was in the last stages of dying, and by the time he had finished healing her, she was out dancing on the lawn. And there was another lady there that had been deaf since she was 8 years of age. She was 48 or 49, and she had her hearing aids in her hand, and when he went to talk to her and ask her how she was, she could hear. So there was all these amazing things. Even the politician from Otaki, he was getting healing there. And then he came and stood in front of me, and he said, "Well," he said, "that looks like the cancer's spread." He said, "It's gone into the spine, it's in your lungs, and it looks like it's going into the liver." Now he said, "If you do exactly what you're told, you'll be healed." I thought, "Oh yeah." And he said, "You've actually been having communication since you were a little girl with what you call UFOs." And I went, "Oh," and pushed back against the chair, and I thought, how does he know this? And he said, "When you leave here at 12:10 today, there are 2 craft over the top of this house." And he said, "If you do exactly what I tell you and take these vitamins and different things, you'll have your voice back within 8 days. Well, as it turned out, I had it back in 6 days. When I went back to the doctor and they did more tests, they shook their head and said, I didn't tell them that I had alien encounters or this man, what they told me, or I did say, look, I'd taken vitamin E and I took all this, and he says, "Oh, that wouldn't do it." Obviously, it has to be a miracle. So, yeah, so anyway. So that's just part of the experiences I've had with people from other worlds. And I've often been with people that don't believe, and they soon change their mind. So, but, you know, we'd be crazy if we thought we're the only people in this universe. There's many that are probably more advanced to us. And, you know, you wonder who put us here in the first place, and where do we get our knowledge from? You know, this is, it just, you don't just then get it out of the air. You've got people telling you and teaching you from when you're little. So, but, you know, I don't believe that there's no such thing as death, because it's just another state of consciousness, and we keep coming back till we get it right. You know, I was talking to my friends last night, we were discussing this, and I said, well, if you're a criminal, you've done something horrid, and you go over, you're not going to spread wings and become an angel overnight. You have to earn it. You know, whatever you've done, you have to earn it. And Spirit told us one night that when we are reincarnated, our choice, we come back, there are some people, like children sometimes pass away very young, and they explained that. They said what's happened, their life was cut short in the previous life, and they went before they were meant to, so they've come back for that short time to live out that, and also to teach their parents. So there was a lot of stories that I was told about what happens to us, and you know, and sometimes you'll find people that have had a horrendous life in the previous life, they come back here and they're full of joy, they might become millionaires or whatever, because they've earned it and they've gone through that. And then I think the other thing too, when we go through all the different types of illnesses, like that I have, and then I trained as an osteopath and herbalist and hypnotherapist, anything to do with healing. Because when I was young I wanted to be a doctor, but I only spent about 10 months because I got rheumatic fever. So I never finished it, but I went on to study and train under the British scheme, and was able to help people and heal them. One of the interesting things I had one day, this young man came, because I had doctors that used to refer patients to me, and this tall young man who was a footballer came in and he looked down at me and he said, I don't know why doctor referred me to you. He said, how can you help me? Because he was about 6'3" and nearly as broad. So I put him on my table and started working on him, and I always pray and ask for help. And just then I heard this voice say to me, lift up your hands, because he had problems in L4 and 5, and he had problems in the cervical and that area as well. And I lifted my hands up off his off L4 and 5 in the sacral area, and I looked, and there's a tall man standing at the end of the couch. He was dressed in a neat suit. He had actually, it was interesting, he had a fob watch, and his shirt was one of those, the collars connected and it had pearl buttons. Very neat looking. He was about 6 foot tall. And I lifted my hands up a few inches off this young man's back, and all of a sudden his vertebrae clicked back in. And I said to him immediately, who are you? And he said, William J.B. Forbes, doctor. And then he disappeared. Well, he came a few other times, and then one night he came through at our meditation and explained that his name is, and I said, well, what's the J.B.? And he said it was William James Bennett Forbes. He passed away on the 14th of April 1934. He was a Harley Street specialist, and he said if only he'd known about spiritual healing, he felt he could have done so much more for his patients. So anyway, I used to go down to Boundary Street Church, and I sometimes used to do the platform, and there was an elderly gentleman that used to come there, and he was a retired doctor. So I went up and had a chat to him, and I said to him, is there any way you can, because I believe skepticism is a healthy, I always check everything, you know, you can't believe everything you're told. I said, is there any way you can check whether this man really existed? So I gave him all the details. Then I hadn't seen him for many months, and then one day I was down the church and he came up all excited and he said, you were right. Well, by this time I'd forgotten. I'm right about what? And he said, that doctor. He said he did live and he did exist. He was a Harley Street specialist. And he did die in 1934. So that was confirmation. So it is good if you can get confirmation. And I think you've got to question everything. Like, we have these energy fields within our body, which are called chakras. The Tibetans use them, and what happens, it's a life force too, we call the etheric body, which even though you can't see it, but that energy field that's around our body, that is where knowledge and wisdom and everything is connected, it comes in. And the other thing too is we need to always work from the heart centre up. A lot of people play games with the Kundalini and the solar plexus. Now, what happens with a lot of people, they so want to be psychic, they sit and they practice and all this, but what they don't realise, they can pick up negative and mischievous souls that will play games with them. And if someone says you have to do this, that or the other, you question, because Spirit doesn't tell you that. Spirit's there with love, and they come from a higher consciousness. They help and guide you. But I've seen so many people's personalities have changed. Even though they were good, they start playing around with the lower forces. And they get all these people come and give them all this rubbish, and their whole personality changes, which is very, very sad. So, you know, I say to people when they're starting to meditate, you've got to keep your feet firmly on the ground. You question everything. Because, you know, people play games, or Spirit can play games if they're mischievous. But yeah, I think I've been very lucky. I've experienced so much, the good and the bad and the ugly, as they say. I've been crippled up with arthritis, I've had heart attacks, you name it, I've had it. But I think the reason they did that was so that I could be more humble and help people. Because you can't help somebody if you haven't experienced that health problem, you know. So I think I've been very lucky like that I could help people over the years. Now as a recycled teenager, I think I need help. Not really, but yeah, so I've just been very lucky that I've met such beautiful people and spent so much time in different places in America and Hawaii. I just love Hawaii. It's a beautiful place. And, you know, after you've been overseas for a while, I went with a friend and we went and did a cruise from UK through the Baltic to as far as St. Petersburg. And when I came back, I could understand why the Pope, every time he went to South America, he'd get off the plane and kiss the ground. And when I got back here, I felt like doing that, because Australia's the most fantastic place, and I think a lot of you will agree. We've got gardens and we've got everything here. You know, so I feel so blessed and lucky that this time round that I'm an Aussie. I've been with people that are passing, and I've seen loved ones or people. Sometimes they don't always have to be a relative. It can be a guide that's chosen to be with you through every lifetime. You have helpers, and I have been with people passing, and I have seen that spirit in the room to help them. Yeah, I felt them around when George passed. Yeah, and that was quite a character. He it's 4.5 years since he left, because you knew him fairly well. And I always remember he had false teeth, and he pushed his teeth out, and he more or less said, "I don't need these bloody things where I'm going." But he was a character. He loved telling jokes. But yeah, there were spirit people around. Look, I've had so many experiences with passing on or death, and I just accept it as the norm. You know, there's no problem with me. And I've also helped a lot of other people to pass over, because that's the biggest fear. Fear is created through ignorance. And that's the sad part about even a lot of these churches. They put fear and dogma into people, and there's nothing to be fearful about. We're here for a reason. Because I do a lot of rescue work. In fact, I've got to, when I leave here today, I've got to go and do a rescue with a young family over at Mount Cravat. But I have been into a lot of places where they say they've got a ghost in the house and they've got this, that and the other. 9 times out of 10 it's a loved one that's trying to make communication with them. And I had one case down near Bow Desert we went to, and there was so much activity there. I was actually thrown across a room by this entity. But I said, God's love is stronger than yours. So, but anyway, it was quite interesting. I had a couple of other people who claimed to be psychic and, you know, knew it. But I've never seen people run out of a house so fast as those two. And they're supposed to be there to help people. But, yeah, no, look, I've been to a lot of places, but 9 times out of 10, it's usually a loved one or someone close to them that are trying to make communication. You know, they'll have cups drop and things fall off floor, you know, all sorts of things. I had a case some years ago. I was busy with a patient in the afternoon, and I kept picking up this young man, and he kept saying his name was Jeffrey, and he wanted to contact Debbie. And so in my talk I said casually to the patient, "Oh, have you got family?" And he said, "Yes." I said, "Oh, what's their names?" So, and then I found it wasn't for him. But anyway, about 4 o'clock, 4:30, the phone rang, and this girl said, "Look, I've had to walk 3 blocks to get to a phone. I need to come to see you." And all of a sudden this young man appeared in front of me. And I said, "Have you got a brother that passed by the name of Jeffrey? Is your name Debbie?" And she went, "Yes." And she lived in Wagga. Yeah. And she said, "I've come all the way up to Brisbane and I want to see you." And I thought, I didn't really want to see anyone that night. I was a bit tired. But anyway, she came, and he came through. And the upshot of the whole thing was they were strict Catholics. And he was engaged to this girl, and they'd had a fallout and had an argument. And she'd thrown the ring back at him, and he went to the pub with his mates, got a few drinks under his belt, decided that her parents were at fault. That was the cause of why they broke up. So he was going to go out and see them. They were out on a farm. So his mate went with him to try and stop him. Anyway, he had a gun. and I don't know whether he was trying to threaten them or what, but he and the girl's brother tried to take the gun off him, and it went off and it shot him and killed him. And yeah, so anyway, the upshot was that his mother thought that he'd committed suicide, which is a terrible sin in the eyes of the church, but he hadn't. Anyway, he came through and gave me all this information, and he said, oh, you know, so-and-so, he's over here, you know, so-and-so. And he gave her, and she said, well, that was my neighbour that passed. And, you know, because she was in England at the time when he died, her brother died, and he gave her all these people's names through me who'd passed over. And then he said, oh, by the way, he said, did you know Mum had another baby before she got married? We got a little sister. And she said, you know what? Auntie so-and-so said Mum had had a baby, and Mum denied it. And I said, oh, okay. You wouldn't believe it. She went home. About a week later, I get a phone call from her mother who wants to come and see me. And she said, I don't know where you got all this information, but she said, that's a lot of rubbish. And she said, if he was really here, he'd be able to give you the name of his 3 pet birds. And I thought, oh, this is crazy. Anyway, as she was going out the door, I heard his voice in my ear. He said, tell her, and I can't remember the name of the birds now. And I said, by the way, well, who are these names? And she stopped and her mouth dropped out, and she said, that's the name of his 3 birds. So I said, look, take this book. This is a book on the teachings of Silver Birch, and he explains about life and death. I said, I want you to take it with you, and you go home and read it. Well, I never heard any more, but nearly a year later, a parcel came in the post, and there's the book. She'd returned it with a letter, and she thanked me very, very much for the help that I'd given her. She said, my whole family have read it, my neighbours have read it, and just about everybody in Wagga has read this book. And she'd sent it back and thanked me. So, you know, and she was saying that sometimes in his room, she kept it as it is, his brushes and things would move off the dressing table, and she blamed one of the grandchildren for doing it. And he was doing it, yeah. So that's just, I thought I'd share it with you. Well, a lot of times as well, I've got a few people sitting here that come to my group. A lot of times it's just to let them know, those that are in the meditation, know that they're there, and they give names. We usually get names of those people, but we also have some beautiful messages from Spirit that come through on personal growth and love, and a lot of it's, you know, when they come from a higher level of consciousness, it's all about peace and healing, and occasionally we might get messages about what's happening. They didn't tell us who was going to win the win yesterday. We didn't get that. Then we weren't interested, were we? But they do give you beautiful messages at times. Yeah. So it's the same as you've got a beautiful glow around you at the moment, and you've got a gentleman standing right beside you, and I get a feeling it's either a father or an uncle that on your dad's side.
Is this me or
you? Mm. And I get a lot of love. You've gone through a lot of things in your life, but I'm being told to thank you because you're very brave. You have come out in a very positive, and you do a lot to help other people. And they want to thank you, and there's a lot of love coming through for you.
I love them all. Thanks, Glenn.
You're welcome.
My grandfather.
Yeah. Who was the lady that had the red hair or Albany hair? Did she sing or play the piano? It's on your mum's side.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah.
Oh yes, of course.
Yeah, well she's with you too.
Yeah.
And you know that song, God, they often give me some. You know that song, I do love to be beside the seaside?
Yeah.
And she used to sing that. They used to sing it round the piano.
That'd be right, yeah.
Yeah, God bless you.
Yeah.
Don't you find, Glennys, that you tell people something and they go, no, no, no. I've had this with other people who come here, and they're, no, no, no. And then later, next time I see them, they say, you know that woman who said mother? I remembered later.
Exactly,
Yes,
yeah.
it was.
Yeah. Well, you know, there was a lady came to see me one morning. It was about 10:30, 11:15. And about 11:15, I said to her, you've got this man, and he said his name, whatever it was, and she said, that's my father-in-law. She said, I'm going to visit him. He's in hospital, he's dying, and I'm going down to see him at the PA. And I said, well, and I said, will he stand beside you? And she said, he couldn't have. He's still alive. Okay. Anyway, that afternoon about 4 o'clock the phone rings, and she rings me, and at exactly 11:15 he passed away. And he came straight out of his body. Yeah. So she rang. But people say, oh, you know, they've got to be dead for a long time before they communicate. Well, that's not right. If there's a strong bond or love, they will make communication. And it depends on how advanced you are too, and how sensitive, you know, whether you can pick these people up. But, you know, a lot of these places I go to, you know, they say they've got ghosts in their house and they're scared. 9 times out of 10 it's relatives or a family member trying to... I had one lady, this was hilarious. I had 2 people come to see me this morning, and the first lady, she was, I think she was German. And when she walked in, she had a man with her, and I gave her the name, and I think his name was Carl or Carlos or something like that. And she said, that was my father and I hated him. And I said, well, he's with you. She said, well, I didn't come for that. I want to know if I'm going to remarry. Am I going to come into some money? Am I going to do this? And I thought, holy hell. Anyway, she left, and this other young girl came to see me, she'd been to see me over the years. And I hadn't known, but in the meantime, my father passed, and he came through, and she was so excited. Anyway, that's all right, she went. But this woman, the next day, she rang and she said, there has to be something wrong with the tape, because I let people tape the readings. She said, what you said was at the end of the tape, and she said that in between there's somebody laughing. She said, this man's laughing. And I said, well, it's probably your father, and he probably wasn't exactly happy about your behaviour. Anyway, that was all. But anyway, that morning I used to have a lady who used to come and do my hair once a month. And then the phone rang a little while later, and this girl said, you know the tape that you did for me? She said, there's hardly anything on it. And I said, well, that's strange. Anyway, this girl was there to do my hair, and I just bought a tape with music on it. So I went over and I put it on. I said, I'll play this. It's absolutely beautiful, this piece of music. Pushed the button to play, and this man's voice came on the tape and said, the tape didn't work because the energy was too low. What? So I pushed the button again and played it, and this exasperated voice said, the tape didn't work because the energy was too low. So I played it 3 times. So I went over, dialed this girl's number, she was at work, and I said, look, I want you to listen to this tape. I said, I've got my hairdressing friend here, and she will witness this. So I took the phone over close, pressed the button, and next thing I hear her screaming on the phone. She said, that's my dad. That's my dad's voice. Anyway, so we had a chat, and I hung up, and I said, you know, that was amazing. Anyway, I proceeded to rewind the tape, push the button, and the music started straight away. Yeah. So, you know, all these sort of things, you don't dismiss it, because it's another way of them wanting to communicate with you. When they've come through, and I've had someone sitting there, and all this, it can be Italian or Greek or whatever, comes through, that person knows straight away. And they tell me what they're saying. But sometimes I get it, sometimes I can understand what they're saying. But, you know, I've had people of other nationalities come to see me, and when Spirit has come through, they've come through in their own language. And I wouldn't have a clue half the time, because what happens, most of the time I channel the information, and if you came back half an hour later and asked me, I wouldn't have a clue what I told you, because it came from Spirit. So, but there are times when it comes through, and I do remember. Yeah. Years ago when we were over in Hawaii, because my husband often would fly over and we'd go to some of the outer islands. Anyway, we decided to go over to the island of Kauai. It's a beautiful island, and we booked to hire a car. But what happened, the army were going to be there. So our plane had to fly around until all the army landed and left the airport. So anyway, we got the car and off we trotted. We drove along. And as we were going along, George said, "Oh my God, I need to go to the toilet." So I looked around, and there, looking down over the bank, you could see the ocean. So he said, stop here." So he jumped out, went down over the bank, and I'm sitting there and I'm looking out over all the trees and bushes, and all of a sudden I saw this man stand up with a mic, and then all the bushes started to move. And then I heard, "Camouflage squad dismissed." And all the trees stood up. And I have never seen my husband run so fast as he came up that hill. And he said, "Quick, drive." And I was laughing so much I could not drive. It was so hilarious. Yeah. So goodness knows some poor devil got peed on. But that was just one of the funnies. I spent a lot of time with kahunas and that over there, and they'd take me to quite a few places. And on the island of Kauai is a very spiritual place, and I took a group of friends from Brisbane over. There was about 15 of us, and we went to what they call a heiau. Now, I don't know if any of you know what a heiau is. It's much like, the Aborigines have their bora rings, but the heiaus, they usually build bricks and rocks, and they always pick the spiritual areas where there's good energy coming out of the ground. Anyway, yeah, we went to this one. There was a lot of trees and that around, and there was some big boulders and rocks. So we got permission. You always have to ask permission to go in before you go into these places, not only from the person that's caretaking it, but from spirit. So we sat down, and George climbed up on this boulder, and it was about that far off the ground. He sat up there, and the man that was a caretaker, he said often the UFOs would fly through here. Anyway, George is sitting up there, and next thing we looked up, and he's levitated off the rock. And he's saying, "No." Next thing they dropped him on the ground. He heard the voice say, "Do you want to come with us?" And then he said, "Oh yeah." And the whole lot of us witnessed it. He came up probably about that far off the rock. And then when he said no, they dropped him on the ground. So, you do get some amazing things happen at times. But, yeah, so it was quite amazing. I found the Hawaiian people are beautiful people. They're very spiritual. I was very fortunate to work with quite a few of the kahunas. Now, how many know what a kahuna is? A kahuna is something like what we'd call a psychologist, a healer, people that have a gift. Now, what happens sometimes, children are chosen out of the royal family or villages that have the gift. So I guess they've got psychic or abilities. So they're taken and trained by the elders, by the kahunas. And they're quite amazing, the things that you see over there, because they're very, very spiritual. And but I also had some funny things happen too. One of the interesting people, and excuse my names at the moment, I'm hopeless at names at the moment, but it'll come back. One of the ladies, she used to always meet me I'd come home and then I'd go back. She'd always meet me with a hat, or I'd get a lei, but she was brilliant. She had a ukulele, and she was the original Bloody Mary in South Pacific. Amazing lady. And we'd go, there's a whole group, we'd go and sit in the park on a rug, and she'd get a ukulele out and sing. And often she'd go on some of these cruises and entertain people. Well, she was around 80 then, so no doubt she's since passed. But it was just so amazing, the people, that I was very lucky to spend time, the same as Wayne Dyer, and I spent so many interesting people, with people that are healers that have written books, and some of them are pretty down to earth, some of their ego gets out of control, and you've written a few books and everybody thinks you're just wonderful. But It's quite interesting because I've met some amazing people, but I also meet some amazing, beautiful people here. Everybody has gifts. Everyone, you all have a gift. You come into this world with gifts. Whether you call it psychic, intuition, gut feeling, you all have that. And you can also communicate. How often do you think of someone and next thing the phone rings and they're on the phone? Because you're telepathic. And that was one of the things that I was teaching when I was in Hawaii. I used to teach bending spoons, telepathy, and I used to teach all this sort of thing. And one afternoon we went to Denny's for lunch, for tea. It was about, there was about 14, 15 of us. So we sat there and we started bending spoons, and you should have seen the look when we went to get up. Trouble is you bend them, but you can't straighten them. So when we got up to go, you should have seen the look on the waitress's face when she saw all these teaspoons all bent and twisted. But yeah, so I used to, and telepathy is very important because Spirit has told me, our off-world friends, that it's very important to learn telepathy because that's how they communicate. They communicate with us. And I've been with other people when we've had physical contact with these people that come from another world. There's a lot of them walking around among us. They look like us. Some of their skin's a lot paler. Yeah, I've had quite a few experiences. One of the experiences, going back, we went up into the Gulf and we were coming back and we stopped at this causeway near Georgetown. We were on our way to Atherton, and this jeep came along with two, looked like soldiers dressed in camouflage gear. One was a female, one was a male. And I said to our friend Ken, who was driving, because we'd stopped because we needed something to drink. We were thirsty, and the road then was not sealed. So these people went past, and I said to him, "Is the military working up here?" And he said, "Well, I've been coming up here bringing tour buses for years, and I've never seen them here before." All of a sudden, this vehicle was back, but instead of facing the way they'd come, they were facing this way. And they both bowed and said, "Can we be of service?" Well, you know, anyone that drives a Jeep out west and they pull up, they don't say, "Can we be of service?" They say, "G'day, mate, you having problems or what's going on?" And as Ken was talking to them, I looked at her and I thought, "Are you the ones I'm supposed to communicate and meet?" She nodded her head. So I telepathically said to her, "Well, I'm going to walk around this trailer we're towing and I'm going to get up close and I want to touch you." So as I walked round, everything went totally still. Even the cattle, the birds, nothing. Absolutely still. And then eventually we got in the car and followed them. There was a slight incline. So we followed them. They were ahead of us, probably about from here to the fence away. They disappeared. So we carried on the rest of the time to Atherton. And when we got in there, Ken turned the radio on in the car. All our watches were 20 minutes slow. So we'd actually lost 20 minutes. So that's happened several times, quite a few times. It seems like time, just you lose time.
Did you touch her? You didn't get around?
No, I only got as far as the back of the trailer. And then everything went quiet. But yeah, we've had quite, but we had another experience up north, and yeah, so we were told to go to this place, Mount Inkerman, and they'd show themselves. So there were two people that took us up in their four-wheel drive, and they were very strict Methodists. I think they thought we were a bit crazy, but anyway, we went up and we could look down over the fields where the sugar cane that was growing, and you could see a train coming, you see the light. But there were these lights down in there, and I said, they must be growing things. You know how sometimes they grow things and they have lights? Anyway, but they did tell me before I left Brisbane that on the I think it was the 14th of August, it was at the time when the big hand was on 11 and the little one was on 9, they'd show themselves. But they showed me a picture of this mountain, and I thought, there's nothing round Brisbane that resembled it. But when we went up to this place, this friend was taking us down to where this man sells crystals and that. And then he took me around where this school was, where his wife used to go to school. And as we went to turn to go up to where these people were, his friends, I looked down and there's this mountain. So I got excited and jumped out of the car. And I said, what's the name of that? And he said, it's Mount Inkerman. And I said, well, we've got to go up there. And he said, well, I can't do anything now, but tomorrow night being Monday, my daughter's going to do a course on first aid. I've got to drop her off. He said, I'll drive you up there. He said, but the road's pretty rough. But anyway, we got up the top and there was a concrete strip and they had a guardrail around it. And there were 6 of us there. And right on, and he looked at his watch and he said, goodness me, it's 5 to 9 already. And just then, this light came up out of the field and flew across over us. Another one came up. There were 4 of them. They went over the top. And I said to them, I said to Marjorie, well, that was interesting. She said, they weren't planes. What were they? And anyway, when we went to go down the hill to go home, George was sitting in the front and he said, I wonder if there's any more. And just then one came up in front of us. Now, a night or two later, we went to a friend's place and she was having a meditation. And this entity came through and said they were from the Andromeda Rex, from the Ashtar Command, which I'd never heard of. And what they'd actually shown, they had not come into our atmosphere, but they were projecting. They can project, because if they did, their energy that would burn us would be injured. So that's what it was. They project these lights that look so real over the top of us. So that was quite interesting. Yes?
How do you tell the difference between what you're connecting with? Whether it's aliens, whether it's the deceased, whether it's
whether they're between, yeah. I think a lot of them are spiritual because they're concerned about what's happening to our world, even though they can't interfere, but they did interfere when they were bombing Iraq and a few other places because they disintegrated the bombs. But they are concerned of the damage that we're doing to our earth through greed. But the majority of the ones that we've had connection with are very spiritual.
Yeah, but how do you tell the difference between spirits and, say, aliens? With telepathic communication?
They can't. They are. They're very telepathic, but it's different. I don't know how I can explain that. Well, we've had them come through at our meditation over the years, but you can tell because of the sound of their voice. And they've been giving us things, telling us what's going to happen. I remember years ago, they used to tell us what was happening, like when the Berlin Wall fell down, the time, accidents, things that were happening in government. We used to get all that. Well, Spirit doesn't bring that through. We used to get a lot of information. But, but most of them are very spiritual, and that's why they said we need to work on our spirituality and try and bring peace to the world. And that's why they go to many different groups with the same information and messages.
There are people though, Glennys, who have near-death experiences. Say Daniel Brinkley's one that comes to mind, where they are told future events.
Yeah. Well, yes, but the whole thing is what you have to understand. There's no such thing as time. It's the past, present, and future all in one. And you understand and see it. You don't have to talk about it, but you've got this knowingness within yourself. You know that this is what they're showing you is real. So, and I think it's different for a lot of people. It depends on how progressive they are and how spiritual. But when you raise your consciousness into that higher conscious stage, that's when you get a lot more positive information. But they're not here to run our lives. They're here to help us, to guide us and show us love, unconditional love. That's basically what it's all about, yeah. But, you also have to understand that we are a soul with that physical body. And every time we come back, when we go back in the spirit world, we have all that knowledge, and then we have a choice on whether we want to come back or not. So whether we have things to outlive or to grow from, or to teach. So that's basically what it is. I can only tell you from my own experience, and others that have told me, that have spend time with. So you virtually can be dead for a second or two. And we astral travel out of our body, we have dreams, people come to us. It depends on how advanced. Sometimes we come back and think, I've got to remember that. And then if you don't write it down straight away, you forget. You know? But I think
what do you think the purpose of dreams are, Glennys?
I think a lot of the dreams are as a result of your daily life. Like, you know, if you've had a terrible day or something's happened, you'll go and dream, and you'll dream of something horrid or something happening, but it doesn't seem to relate to what had happened to you during your life during that day. And I think a lot of it is you dream of if there's been situations in your life during that day or weeks or months, it comes back to you in like a dream. And sometimes you get opportunities to look at it and maybe make changes.
Right.
You know, make changes in your life. It may not always be what you want, but I know I've been dreaming such a lot lately. Oh, and half the time, and they're so silly, but then half the time I don't remember. I wake up and I think, oh, I've got to remember that. It was good, and then I don't.
Didn't you have some scientific study done on your abilities, your mediumship abilities? Was that with Andrea Kahar?
No, that was Professor Gary Swartz from the university in Tucson. He's written quite a few books. He's a psychiatrist and he runs the psychology department. It was actually Whitley and Ann Stryber, who were friends of mine. They took me down there, and because he wanted to meet me, so we went out for lunch, and then he invited me to come back the next day and do these tests. So I said, okay. When I got there and he was waiting for me, I immediately tuned in and I picked up what they were going to do. So I thought, oh, I'll go along with it. Anyway, but the funny part about it, before we left the hotel, I was dressed in autumn tones. Something told me to go and change, so I went in, I changed into a bright yellow blouse and a sleeveless yellow top and black slacks. And when I got there, they took me in another room, they put all these things all over you to test you, and there was somebody in another room, and I had to tune in and pick up who it was. And so I immediately picked up this lady, and I said that she was going to be involved in films. She's within a week she was going to Italy. I said she's got a photo in a handbag of 3 males. One I think's her husband, the other 2. But I also feel that there's medical. But I kept getting the yellow and black, and I'm thinking logically I'm picking up what I'm wearing. And then I picked up from Gary. I picked his mother up and a few others, and Whitley and Ann, and it was the Tracys, John and Richard were with us. They were sitting out in the other room. And then all of a sudden I got this man that was a very close friend of Whitley's that had passed away a few months earlier. Anyway, when they came out, the lady came out of the other room. She was dressed exactly the same as me. The yellow and the black. And she was a doctor from, what's the next place up? I forgot now. Anyway, but she was the one that filmed this UFO. It was nearly a mile across. Memphis. No, it wasn't Memphis. It was, it's all right. It's Alzheimer's disease. Can't remember the name of the place. But, and it was interesting because she had gone over to LA and they were filming a documentary on the UFOs, and then she was invited to go to Italy, and she was involved with Paula Harris, who is a journalist and writer. And she took the photo out, and yes, it was her husband and 2 sons are both doctors. So yeah, and then of course Whitley was over the moon because I picked up his close friend, and so when Professor Gary Swartz wrote his book, he wrote another book, and then he mentioned me and said that I was truly from Australia, that I was a genuine medium. So yeah.
Was that his close friend that I've got a recording of you and Whitley Strieber, and he's talking about you, how you blew his mind because you picked up that he had a friend who had played the violin. Was that the same one?
No, that was a different one.
It was a different one, yes. And he said, how on earth, of all things, would she know that I had a friend, as a childhood friend, who played the violin?
Because I picked him up.
Yeah.
But
Interesting.
yeah, no, I spent quite a lot of time with them. They took me down to this gallery, and I can't remember the name, some famous man that had built it, and it's pretty hard getting parks. So I said to him, no, don't go up to the next level, because I said, the third one along you'll get a park. So lo and behold, we get there and there's the park. So that blew him away. He said, how did you know there's a park? Because I said, I projected myself. So, but you do, you sort of know you can go and do these things. I mean, so I'm not doing it all the time because I've got to live an ordinary life. It's the same as, don't laugh. It's the same as I'll be busy cooking tea, I might be stirring something in a pot. The next thing I feel someone stand beside me talking. So I get rather rude with them. I just tell them to piss off and come back when I'm ready. They're not going to run my life. So yes, I do that occasionally. This group, I took them over to Hawaii. The night before we left, or the day before I left, I got a phone call, and this man said to me, you're taking a group of people to Hawaii. And I said, yes, I am. He said, I would like to join you. And I said, well, I'm very sorry, but we're leaving tomorrow afternoon, but maybe you can come on one of our other trips. And he said, where are you staying? And I thought, it's no bloody business of yours. But anyway, I proceeded to tell him. He said, I will see you. So the plane left at 2, and we got in about 5, 6 o'clock in the morning into Honolulu, and we all went to the hotel. We were staying in, I've forgotten the name of the hotel, but anyway, we decided to go and have a rest because we had to go and pick up a car around 10, and we were going to meet up with these friends that live over there who were going to drive us around. And we hired 2 of these buses, you know, that hold about, 10 or 12 people. Anyway, the phone rings, and I looked at the watch, and it's around 9. And the lady at the reception said, there's a gentleman downstairs to see you. And I thought, oh, God. Anyway, so I got dressed and went down, and he looked as though he would probably be late 20s, early 30s, and he had this woman with him. She was a little short, petite lady, and I can't try to remember what he said his name was. So he had come to join us, but when we checked afterwards, there were no planes coming in from Melbourne, Sydney or Brisbane that morning. So how did he get from, he said he was on the coast, right? So, but anyway, when we tried to find out where he was staying, he gave us the name of this hotel, and they'd come and join us on our trip around the Honolulu, and Oahu rather, and but every time we'd stop and we'd go take photos, they would disappear. They wouldn't have their photo taken, and we'd go to eat. They'd wander off. But anyway, the last night we were in Honolulu, before we went over to Maui, we were sitting, they were right at the very back of the bus, and we were sitting in front. And all of a sudden I got this prickly sensation under my shoulder blade. And I remember Mary, my friend, was sitting there. I said, Mary, there's something just gone into my back. Can you see what it is? Well, I had slacks and a blouse on. So she said, oh, God. She said, I don't know what it is, but it's about the size of a 5-cent piece. And I turned and looked at these 2. They were pretending to be asleep, and I said, I've just had an implant put in here. Anyway, when we got off the bus, they took off and went. Well, we checked the hotel. They'd never been there. And I did ask them where they were going, and they were going to Norway. But she never spoke. If we asked a question, she'd look at him and he would answer. He would answer. And everyone was curious. Anyway, after they all went, we all got together, and out of the 15 of us, 11 of us had implants. And when we went to get them, they'd move. So we had those for quite a long time, so there were 11 of us. But, you know, Sharon, Jeanette's sister, they were sitting on a wall, and George was nearby. So she said to George, George, look this way and I'll take your photo. So what she did, she quickly turned the camera and snapped them. When it was developed, it was just a complete white light right down to their legs. And all you saw were the boots they were wearing. But anyway, we never saw them again, but I'm sure to convince they were aliens. But the thing was that sometimes he'd be in our vehicle or in the other one that some of the others are in. But you'd be sitting there thinking of something and he'd lean over and correct you. He would correct you what you were thinking. So it really was rather disturbing at times. But yeah, no, they were aliens, it's definitely. But as I said, we managed to get one photo, but it was just a white light right down to their knees. I used to get nosebleeds, and I'd finish up in hospital after I had all these experiences. And I've spoken to a lot of other people that have had UFO experiences, and they've often had nosebleeds because I think they put like implants or put something in your nose.
What was the purpose of the implants in your little group?
I think probably it's probably communication. They keep an eye on us. They probably follow us around. But I do believe that they have been communicating with 2 and 3 generations because it's always at one family, and you can often find that there'll be
probably more because we just don't know the deceased relatives, do we? Our deceased ancestors.
No. That's right. We had another one that used to come, and she didn't like my little Pomeranian dog, so every time she'd come in, she'd give it a bit of a kick. Anyway, one night they were all having supper, and it was summertime, so we had all the doors open, and our little dog, his name was Nero, and he'd run in and out. He'd be running in and out, and we thought, what's he doing? He'd go out and he'd pick up dry dog shit and he'd come and put it under this woman's chair. In other words, she gave him the shits. I'll never forget that.
Don't edit that out, that's good.
Oh yes, you better. But you know, it's just quite incredible, some of the funny things that we experienced and things that would happen. But yeah, that was just quite funny.
What about the spirits of animals, Glennys?
Yeah, well, they do come back. We've had our little dogs and a cat.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's no way a human spirit can integrate and go into an animal. I've heard some silly people write books on that. What a load of rubbish. Because they're animals, they're not human.
What about with babies? Like
stillbirths, and that?
No. I mean, like when children are born and they're babies, because they don't do that, are they somehow protected from those discarnate entities entering into their body, or?
I think what happens, going from what I've been told from spirit, they come in. They've chosen to come back in and chose their family, right? But they've probably. I don't believe that they'd have many other spirits with them. It'd be the spirit of that, what they were in a previous life.
What about babies? They wouldn't have that protection, or do they have that protection so that?
Yeah, because don't forget they're pure human strength in spirit world, and they've come back to be reborn. So, but you know, it's interesting because I had a girl come to me for hypnosis here. This is going back a few years. And I regressed her, and I went and regressed her too far because I took her back into the spirit world. And I said to her, I asked her what she was doing, where she was. She said, I'm looking down at my future mother. I said, really? I said, how old is she? She said, she's 18. And I said, well, why have you chosen her to be your mother? She said, because she has lessons to learn and I'm about to teach her. Now this girl, she went through terrible behaviour problems. She went through drugs, all sorts of things, lesbianism, you name it. And then when she was about 34, she completely changed and became very spiritual. But it was quite interesting how she told us why she chose that mother. Yeah. So, you know, that sort of got me thinking. You know, we do choose our parents. They don't choose us. And we choose the time of our death or how long we're going to stay on this earth.
There was a guy who told me his experience where he had a pre-birth memory and he was with these beings who were saying, well, you know, this is where where you're at in your evolution, that this family and this place called Earth is a good place for you to go to continue your own evolution. And he said, I'm not going down there. I'm not going. And he said he was literally did not want to go, but he said he really had no choice because that was where he needed to go. And his spirit guides were saying, no, you have to go. And he said something like, his last memory was, no, I'm not going, but then he's in the body of his mother's body. So I don't know how that works.
Well, I think we do have choices. We have free will.
Yeah.
That's what he said. I don't know.
I think too, children sometimes come back with clear memories. I have a friend that was lived over on the north side, and her young boy Jack, he was only very small, and 3 or 4, and they'd be driving along, and he'd say, "Oh, that's where Uncle so-and-so lives," or this, and she'd say, "I don't know anybody there." Oh, he said, "No, that was my other mother." And, you know, it's just quite incredible. And she said to him, because she sent him to a Catholic school, and she said, "Now you're not allowed to talk about any of this to any of the children," because he'd see things, and he'd say to her brother had passed several years, or before he was born, and he'd tell her messages from her brother, and he was just quite incredible. But we also have a friend who has a daughter that's come back. How old is she now? 5? 4 or 5? 6. She is absolutely amazing of the information last year we went out for my birthday up to Southside Sports Club, and her grandmother brought her along, and now she'd never seen me before, and her mother really didn't know George. Anyway, she's sitting opposite me, and she said, "Do you know you've got George standing behind you, and he said to tell you happy birthday?" And I went, "What? What's she, 4 or 5 then?" Yeah, I was just blown away. So, you know,
Interesting.
so these children, a lot of the children coming back, I think because we are more open, that they can come and express and share. Well, years ago, if a child said that, you'd say, "Oh, don't be stupid, it's your imagination." You know, so they'd get knocked back even going to school. They couldn't talk about. So these days the parents are more open and connected and can understand, so it does help them. Yeah. Right.
We've run out of time.
Oh, good. Can I go now?
We'll let you out early. No.
Will you let me out early? Can I come? I've got to come. I said I wasn't going to do any readings, but sometimes Spirit guides me to push me. The lady in the white and black spotted. I think you gave me your name earlier, didn't you? Helen. Helen, you've got a lady with you, right, in spirit. Now, I don't know whether it's a grandmother or an aunt or someone very important. Have you got a New Zealand connection? Or one of you?
No, but I'm doing family ancestry. Apparently there's a cousin or something in New Zealand.
Anyway, well, what I'm being told is you have been under a lot of stress and a lot of pain through health issues. And I'm being told that you need to follow your intuition because you're going to be okay. You're going to come out of this okay, right? It's going to take you about a good 8 to 9 months. But you've got to be positive. And don't give in to other people's negativity. Right? God bless you. You've got a lot of help there from Spirit. I don't know what your problem is, but that's what I'm being told. Whew. Anyway, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.
Okay.
And thank you. I haven't
Thanks,